Got another project going on here today out at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. This is our Oliver 80 table saw that we're going to be working on restoring at a little weekend event coming up here in a couple of weekends at the museum. We're going to have a lot of volunteers coming in, a lot of YouTube viewers, a lot of members off of the Old Woodworking Machines discussion forum, OWWM.org. So, you know, we're going to probably have, I don't know how many people actually show up, probably somewhere between 10 and 20 people coming in for the weekend to help us out here at the shop. And we're going to have a little project weekend and try to restore this machine over the weekend. You know, in an ideal world, we could come in here on Friday, start tearing this thing down, and be able to completely rebuild it over the weekend. But because we want to try to be able to get the job done, quite honestly, there's a few things I'm going to have to do beforehand because there are just some time-consuming parts of this restoration, and we need to get some information off of this so that we can have the parts we need. So today I'm going to start doing just a little bit of disassembly on this, just enough to get into it deep enough to get done what we need to do. And so my goal is I want to get the top off of this. I want to get the fence off of this. We're going to start doing a de-rusting process called electrolysis, where we use basically a chemical reaction using some electricity to de-rust this. And because this is a machine surface on the top, I really want to do a good job and try to preserve as much of this as possible. I don't want to get in here with abrasive on it, because if you put an abrasive on this machine surface, you don't get a perfectly flat surface, and that's where I really like to use electrolysis. And I'll probably put together a totally separate video on that over the next week or so you guys can see that. And I've actually had some requests to talk about electrolysis as well, so we'll be doing both of these pieces in that. The other thing I need to do beforehand is I need to get to the bearings on this. This is all pretty much froze up. There's a set of bearings, ball bearings in this particular machine down here, and we need to replace those, and I don't know what bearings I need to go buy. So that's another thing. If we came in here on Friday, started tearing this thing apart, you know, the chances of being able to run down to the bearing store and have the exact bearings for this, you know, is probably pretty slim. So I want to go ahead and get the bearings out of this so that I can find out what bearings I need and get those ordered and have those coming in. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm going to work on today, is working on this, and we'll try to keep the camera running and let you guys see the process we use and the challenges we run into. And I can already tell just coming out here and getting this machine moved over here out of the storage and out here to the shop this morning, and I got some PV Blaster and got some folks stuff soaking on there, and I can already tell I'm going to have some challenges, and we'll talk about how we deal with those when we get to them, and hopefully save the day. So let's get started on tearing this thing apart. So let's just get right here on this. The first thing we're going to do is pull this fence off, and this is a kind of a unique fence on a table saw, at least from what we see on table saws today. But back in the old days, this saw was made about 1941. This type of fence was pretty common, and you can adjust it in and out by loosening some things up. It slides on this bar. You got some pins here that kind of index everything in place. This clamps down on the table, and it's actually a pretty nice little fence setup. Very high precision, you can really do some fine adjustments with it. Of course, nowadays a fence on a table saw is, quite honestly, it's made a lot cheaper than this. And the fences on table saws today are good, don't get me wrong, but you know, this is kind of unusual, I guess, from today's standards. The challenge we have on this is it is just really, really rusty. And similar to the problems we ran into on our J Advanced restoration, you know, the cast iron holds up to the elements pretty well. I mean, yeah, you got rust on here. You can get a little bit of pitting on cast iron, but generally speaking, cast iron, it will stand the elements pretty well. However, steel tends to rust and pit and rot away a lot faster than the cast iron. So the cast iron parts on this are in pretty good shape. The parts on here that are made out of steel, i.e. these pins, this lock knob here, this adjustment here, the pieces, the metal in here that these pivot on, they're all toast. We're going to have to redo all this, and it's going to be a challenge just getting some of this apart. This stuff is just so pitted. I mean, this piece down here is about gone. And probably one of the biggest challenges I'm going to run in right on from the start is to get this off. I have to take this knob out, and I'm going to zoom in here on this and overlay it in the video, but there's hardly any metal left in there. It has rusted down. I mean, that looks like probably a 1/2 inch bolt originally, and there may be, you know, 3/16 of an inch diameter left on that down in there, where it has just rusted away over time. So it's probably impossible that I'm going to be able to screw this thing out. It's going to break off, and then I'm going to have to get that piece out from in there, which is going to be a challenge, and we'll just have to take it a little bit of time and hopefully be able to get that out, and I'll show you hopefully a few tricks on that along the way. So let's go ahead and pull this off. There it goes. So we got a broken bolt, and this is a common problem that I run into restoring old machinery. As you can see, the problem is it's just the meat of the bolt's rusted away, and we got to get that out. My experience has been that when you get something like this, if you got something you can work off of, and we got a little bit of metal on top, the easiest thing to do is try to use some heat to break it loose. Usually on a threaded surface like this, if you look, it's rusted away all up here, but the rust stops right there at the surface where the threads start going in there. And I'll be willing to bet that once we get this out, the threads in there are going to be actually in pretty good shape because it's watertight. There's really no way for water to get in there, or not very much water to get in there, and there's a little oxygen in there. So typically that joint between those surfaces is going to be pretty good. The problem is it's just in there too tight right now. We do have a little bit of rust on the top and bottom. It's just keeping it from coming out. Putting a little bit of heat on it, what that will do is that's going to expand the metal around, and that will a lot of times break that little bit of tension between the two parts that's holding it together, and it'll come right out. So I did come over here with some vice grips a minute ago and just try to see if I could get that to come out on its own, and it's really not wanting to. So anyway, we're going to just put a little bit of heat on it. Again, I'm not trying to get it red hot. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I just want to put a couple of 100 degrees on there and get it hot enough that hopefully it'll screw right out. Let's see how this goes. This is going to be a test to see whether I've been living right or not. I'm hoping that's all we need. Let's see what happens here. I got some vice grips, and look at there. It's just going to come right out. It's perfect. There we go. Alright, so now we need to start looking at trying to get these trunnions off the table saw and getting everything where we can loosen it up. So this is a tilting top table saw, so you can see this trunnion in here. The entire top tilts. This is back before they had a tilting arbor saw like you would normally see now, because this runs off of a flat belt and the motor would stay stationary or it would be hooked up to a line shaft. It really wasn't feasible to really tilt the arbor like we do now, where we tilt the whole motor and everything. But so on these old saws, the whole table top would tilt to be able to cut those angles, hence the trunnion here that would rotate on. So let's get in here and start pulling all this stuff apart and see if we can get it apart. We'll start by taking off this pointer. Trying to. Let's see how easy these screws come out. Good. That pointer's made out of brass. Alright, so next, let's see if we can take this cover off right here. That takes a 9/16. Good, that bolt's coming right out. Now we got this arm here that goes up to the tabletop from the raising gear. There's a worm gear in here that spins around, and that will actually tighten or tilt the table. And this is just a connecting link here. We'll go ahead and try to take this off. I'm just going to put that bolt back in there. It's a shoulder bolt, so we all remember where it goes for right now. All right, it looks like there's two pins that kind of guide this into place, so we need to carefully try to get that out and without messing those pins up. There it comes. All right. Yep, there are the pins. All right, so I think this is now just sitting on this trunnion here. That was all holding it in place. So this end should lift up. I don't think there's anything else holding it down. So let's go to the back side and take the covers off of that trunnion as well. And we'll use the same process on this side. There we go. Alright, the tabletop is free. Right now the only problem I have is just too heavy for me to lift. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some slings. I put under these. I'm going to come in here with the forklift on the tractor, and we'll use the hydraulics to help us pick this thing up and hopefully save our back. So let's see how this goes. So now we're getting down and getting the bearings in the, yeah, that is some kind of stiff. You can feel it, it's just moving a couple, and you can feel every every ball bearing in there moving, and that's all it's moving right now. So let's get in here, let's get this blade off so we don't hurt ourselves, and we'll start disassembling. We'll probably just take this whole assembly off here. There's 4 bolts holding this whole bearing bracket down, and we'll probably take this all off and take it inside and see if we can take it apart, get the bearings out, and see if we can get some new ones ordered. Let's see if we can get this saw arbor or saw blade off and the nut off the arbor. One thing to note about a saw arbor is that the threads on this is going to be left-hand threads, and the reason is that the saw blade's turning this way, and a right-hand thread, the nut could loosen while it was turning, whereas a left-hand thread is going to always be tightening. So when we take this apart, we're going to need to go backwards from normal. I've known more than one person who has spent an awful lot of time trying to get one of these nuts off because they were turning it the normal way instead of the correct way. I put a block of wood down here up against one of those saw blades just because it is turning, and good. That's going to come right off. Great. So when I was just testing this out while ago, I put the wrench on there, the whole everything was just turning, but this little block of wood was just what we needed to hold it in place. And there we go. And that's not in bad shape in there. That's good surface, not a lot of rust. The threads on there look good and clean. So that's going to be good. Now we got 4 bolts holding this down. Hopefully they're going to come out easy. Looks like they are. All right. All right, so now the real fun begins, trying to figure out how to get these bearings out. So I see we got some covers on both sides, so we'll start by loosening these bolts up, taking these off, and seeing what we got to deal with. Yeah, it's going to be 9/16. See it breaking loose. There it comes. Alright, so that slid right out. Alright, so there's a screw going in here. It's not tight in that groove, but there's a slot that goes around here, and that is actually bent over. I don't know if you can see it, but that's bent in. I'm not sure what's going on with that. It looks like just a retainer, but I'm not sure why that's bent that way. Looks like a spanner wrench fits into the grooves on here. Maybe that unscrews, I'm not sure yet. Let's go to the other side and see what we can do on it. Alright, so this is on the other side. This is the flange that the saw blade goes up onto, and it looks like there's a little keyway down here on the bottom, so my guess is that this whole piece is going to pull off. That's probably a tight press fit maybe. I'm going to get a puller and see if I can grab a hold of that and pull it off. Now, because there's a flange on the back, a tapered flange, I couldn't get a regular 3-jaw puller on here like a gear puller because it's just wanting to slide off. So instead what I'm going to use is one of these bearing pullers or bearing splitter, and we'll just sandwich that on there, and this will just tighten right up on here, and that'll give me a good firm piece behind it to pull on. So get this tightened up. All right, so we got everything in here good and tight. This has a little, of course, there's a center in this, and there's a little tit on the bottom of this thing here that kind of keeps it engaged. And we'll just take a wrench here. That should keep that centered, and hopefully this is going to pull right off. If for some reason it looks like it's stiff, I'll probably put just a little bit of heat on this, expand that collar up, which is just a regular trick I use anytime I'm pressing or removing something. Oops, wrong way. Here we go. And yeah, it's coming. All right, let's pull it right off of there. It's on there tight. All right, there we go. All right, that's off of there now. Looks like the keyway came out with it. Little Woodruff key. Fell on the floor, it looks like. I'll have to find that. Okay, but we should be ready to go. We'll go ahead and take this cover off and see what the bearings look like in there. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of caked up in there. Alright, so looks like we got the same type setup on the other side. We got this collar on here. There's a couple of spanner pins in here, and there's a screw in here. And you see there's a slot that goes through this. This screw, what it does when you tighten it up, it pinches those threads that this is threaded on there with to keep it from coming off. So we'll pull that. We'll pull this screw out, hopefully. A lot of crud in there. There it comes. And as long as we got this side over here, this is just going to screw off. And again, we use the spanner pins. This is just a little spanner wrench, a pin spanner wrench. You can adjust it for here. These got 1/4 inch pins on here. We'll engage those in there. And hopefully this will... The bearings are tight. Alright, I think what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to just try to take, this is just on here a little bit tight. I think if I can get it started turning, it'll turn. So I've got a punch, and I'm just going to come in here. I'm really not too worried about this piece because looking at it, I actually see a crack in it, and I'm probably going to have to remake this collar anyway. So I'm not too worried about if I damage it. So I'm just going to take a punch. I'm going to come into that hole, and I'm going to tap this thing, and look, it's just going to spin right off. So that was the whole problem. I just needed to get a little bit of pressure on there, more than what I was getting with that wrench, and probably just a shock from the hammer. It's all this took to break that loose. And that came right off. That's good. So now we got another one of these locking collars on the other side, our locking thread. So let's pull it off and see what we can do. All right, we've turned this thing around, and we got the same type setup on this other side. Again, this little piece here, this little lock wedge, I'm going to just take a screwdriver and try to separate that back out. When I did this on the other one, it actually cracked right here on here, which is why I said I was going to probably have to remake that piece. So hopefully that's enough to break this one loose. Again, we're going to put our little wrench on here, our spanner wrench. And I think this one's going to come off without having to hit it. That's good. That's just what we need. Good deal. All right. Alright, so let's talk about our game plan now. So we've got the caps off. The bearings are basically open in both directions, but we've got to get all this out. We've got to press all these bearings off. And we'll do that on the hydraulic press. So the question is which way do I press it? So when I press it, we're going to actually press the bearing out of a shell, and the other bearing will hopefully come out the bottom when we do out here. We may have to press it off separately off this arbor afterwards. But the question is which way do I go? And after looking at this thing pretty hard, it looks to me like what we need to do is press it from this direction going in that way. And I'm come up with that with a couple of reasons. Number one, this diameter on this shaft is smaller than this one on this side. And it looks to me like, and I really can't tell exactly how this is, but I can tell by spinning this, there's a spacer right here. I don't know if you can see it in the screen, but it's not turning. It's a spacer that's on here, whereas this part of the shaft over here is turning. So I think what this is this has been turned down. We probably got a shoulder here. This pulley slides up against that shoulder. It's actually, I think, a smaller diameter inside, and then there's a bushing on this side to kind of hold it in place. So it looks to me like it's all going to go out in this direction. The pulley, though, is attached right now with just a socket screws, so we'll loosen this up. In fact, take the screw completely out of it so there's no way that it's interfering, and then we'll take it over to the hydraulic press and try to press this thing apart. So I've got this set up over here now, and it's sitting on these plates. I've reached up underneath here and felt and made sure that these are notched out. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's a little square notch in there, and I've made sure that that bearing will clear those. And I just put a little spacer up here on top just to give me some pressure, and we're going to see. Hopefully this is going to come out pretty easy. If it gives us some trouble, again, we can put some heat on those bearings and hopefully let it come out. So we'll start out with the short handle here. Yeah, and it has started moving without hardly any pressure at all, so that's a good sign. Let's see if it continues. Alright, so now we're down to the pulley. Let me reset this, put a different spacer in there. So where we're at now, the top bearing, the shaft has pretty much cleared the inside of the top bearing, and now the pulley part has pressed down. The bottom bearing is actually pressed all the way out of the bottom. It's still on the shaft. You can't see it right now. You'll see it in a minute. But now what we got to do is basically press this out of the pulley, and the whole shaft should come on out. And hopefully that's going to come. Yeah, that's not taking a lot of pressure. A little bit more than the bearing did, but not a lot more. So let's take it on out. Alright, my plate is hitting this top bearing now, so we're going to loosen this back up and put a longer shaft in there and continue pressing it. There we go. Alright, so just as I suspected, that shaft is turned down and it pressed up against that shoulder, so that all looks good. The pulley is loose now, so now what we need to do is press this bearing off of this end, and we've also got the bearing up in this housing that needs to come out as well. So we'll go ahead and get set up to press those out here on the press as well. So we're going to tackle pushing this bearing out of the housing first, and there's actually this spacer that I talked about before that's in there, and I believe that's going to actually help us push that up through. At least that's what we're going to try. I think there's a shoulder on there that will push this through. So we've just got this set up in the press, and put some pressure on that and see if that doesn't come right on out. It's coming. There we go. So there's that bearing. And now we'll press this bearing off the shaft. That's It's going to come out without any problem at all. We've got all the components off the bearing shaft now, or off the arbor with the bearings. These bearings are made by New Departure. They're number 3308. They're both identical. So we'll be going out to the bearing supplier here in town probably after lunch today and get some of these on order. I doubt they have them in stock. They might, but we'll get some on order. Everything looks good. The only concern I have is this lock collar that screws on there. As I mentioned before, right here where this piece is, that just locks those threads by bending this shaft or bending that over and tightening those threads. It's cracked down here on the bottom. It's broken. So I think that'll be a good candidate for a new part to make on the lathe. Shouldn't be too difficult to knock that out. The other one actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. I don't, excuse me, I don't see any cracks or anything on it. I think we can reuse that one fine, but we'll probably just go ahead and make a new one of those. That pretty much concludes what I'm going to be tearing down and breaking down on this table saw before our little weekend event we have coming up. So we've removed the table off the top. That's actually in the electrolysis tank right now being cleaned. I'm going to shoot that, or I'm actually going to have that as a whole separate video series that you can be looking out for on rust removal using electrolysis. Yeah, a lot of people already have done videos on that before, but I have had some requests to do that. So I thought I'd give you guys my take on it, and we'll, maybe you'll learn something new. Who knows? We got the bearings out of this, taken apart, all this apart, so we'll get these new bearings ordered. Probably not going to worry about cleaning anything up. We'll save that for the weekend and go through how to do that when we put it all back together. And I've also got the fence off the table saw off the machine, but that's probably something else I'm going to go ahead and try to tear down before the weekend, because there are several parts that are going to need to be made, turned on the lathe on that, and we may try to go ahead and at least get a few of those done before the weekend gets here, just to make sure we can get all that done over the 3-day weekend that we have some of our viewers out there coming in. So again, if you're looking at this while it's new, on the weekend of June 6th, 7th, and 8th of 2014, we're going to have a little weekend get-together from some of my YouTube viewers and some guys on the OWWM, the Old Woodworking Machines Discussion Forum, going to be coming in for the weekend, and we're going to basically do the restoration on this table saw at that time. So if you catch this after that date, who knows, we may try to do something like that again down the road with another project, but for you guys that are watching this pretty close to when it comes out, if you still want to come to that, please send me an email. Be in Tifton, Georgia at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture, June 6th, 7th, and 8th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Some folks are coming in on Friday, some folks are coming in on Saturday, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I think right now we're up to about 13 or 14 people who have committed to come in for the weekend, or think they're going to be coming in for the weekend. A couple of them are maybe still, but we should have a nice little crowd here that we can all get our hands dirty and work together on a project, and maybe do a little learning and have a good time and with fellowship at the same time. So I'd love for you to make that if you can. So we're going to sign off for now on this video. Thank you guys for watching as always, and thank you to my many subscribers out there who've subscribed to the channel. Thank you for your comments that you send me, guys. I always read every single one of them, and quite honestly, it's your comments that is what encourages me to keep doing this. So thank you so much for all that.